Live. There we are.
Oh,
See that great little symbol up there, Schabla?
oh my God, it's so fancy.
It's so cool. Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am Marcella Marcy Kearns. I'm the Associate Artistic Director here at Milwaukee Chamber Theater. Although I'm not physically at Milwaukee Chamber Theater right now, I'm just representing. With me today is Eric Schabla, whom I have known for many years and regarded for many years. We're going to have a little conversation today about his life and work and what we have to expect from him via Milwaukee Chamber Theater just this week. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Good to see you. Good morning, Schabla.
Good morning. It's so good to be here. I'm so excited. Even though it's virtual, Marcy and I were just talking about how weird it is to keep. I've been doing a ton of this. I know you've been doing a fair amount too in rehearsals and whatnot, and it's such a strange and inadequate medium.
Yeah.
But it's all we have, So
That's how story making may continue right now.
Yeah. Right.
It's been really interesting to see. You're in Spring Green right now, you mentioned.
Yes. Yep.
And I don't know if any of our viewers here right now have been starting to watch the APT readings, but it's pretty amazing to see a lot of Wisconsin folks that we know and love experimenting with this medium.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. And, but I mean, as an actor, it's different. I think, I mean, you've probably experienced this, but like, it feels much more like film in terms of what you're capable of, the nuance you're capable of finding. And
yeah.
I think there was a period of adjustment where a lot of people were finding had to find their feet. These people who are used to playing to crowds of, 1,100 people are suddenly like, whoa, I'm really close to this little thing.
And they might still be reaching 1,100 people, but now it's exactly that kind of medium. Oh, I know acting classes will hereafter be altered.
Yeah, right.
Such a blend. Hey, speaking of acting and of revered theaters, let's talk about you and your career as an actor, and now a burgeoning career as a playwright too. So, tell us where you're from. I have a feeling like you're from not too far away from where I am right now.
Right?
How'd you get into this kind of work?
I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I was really lucky because I grew up when the theater community was really flourishing. Like one of the big periods where there were all these new theaters. There was a strong classical presence too. So I was exposed to that really young, as Marcy knows. And I was also fortunate enough to be part of First Stage, which was a huge, and under the tutelage of John McClay, huge part of my development. But yeah, Milwaukee is really where I found the love for the classics, and specifically at the late Milwaukee Shakespeare. And I think I was in this show. It was like sort of by luck. I was cast in this show. 1 Henry 4, and what were you doing there at the time, Marcy? You were
the education director.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you were also an actor. I remember seeing you in a bunch of stuff. But I remember being a part of that, and it blew my mind. I mean, I was literally standing backstage and listening to every night, just like listen to the play over and over and over. And it was a long run.
It was about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that, because it was in the studio theater at the Broadway Theater Center.
A month, almost a month. And I knew nothing about anything, right? Because I was like 14. I knew nothing about myself or anyone else. But then when I got to high school, and I remember being in, these like kind of basic foundational literature classes, to be like, oh, wow. This is so different from hearing it, right? I'm sort of being taught that I can't understand it. So that was, it was cool to experience. I was very lucky because I got to experience heightened language and the great plays of the Western canon in a really physical way, a really immediate way. and I didn't like my first interaction with it wasn't in a book. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just, yeah, it excited me in a different way, pulled me in a different way. And then I continued that at first stage. I was really obsessed with Shakespeare specifically, probably from like ages 14 to 20, I think. And it hasn't gone away, obviously. I mean, of course, Shakespeare's been the bulk of my acting career, but I started to like realize, oh, there's the Western canon isn't the only thing, and maybe it's actually suppressing other canons, and all this stuff. So, but yeah, so I then went to the Guthrie program at the University of Minnesota and studied in London while I was there.
At the Globe specifically, correct?
Oh, yeah. Studied at Shakespeare's Globe and did a production of As You Like It there, which was wild. And also at this crazy place called the London International School of Performing Arts, which is like the only phrase I can use for it is a clown college. Like you go, it's yeah, it's this like warehouse out in the middle of East London that we would go to, and you would learn all this amazing, like really kind of expressionist, mimey physical theater stuff that was really different from the stuff we'd been doing, which was all like straight and narrow Aristotelian, plot character, and then to have all that stripped away and to be like, oh my god, I have a body,
Yes.
Yeah, that was so it was a great program because it combined that like very traditional Western education with these sort of periods that were meant to strip you of that suddenly, and then you were sort of working without a safety net. And yeah, so that was, I found myself when I came out really prepared to do the play. Most of the plays that I've done have been Shakespeare and Moliere, and I just did Cyrano at the Guthrie last year. So it's all a lot of poetic language, a lot of heightened language. But at a certain point, I think I started to realize like, oh, this isn't the only literature that exists, and that may sound obvious, right?
But to a young artist,
I think, yeah, there's something about especially just like being exposed to new forms, to non-Aristotelian forms, and that's actually part of what's driving me, I think, now in my playwriting is to mess a little bit with form and mess a little bit with the conventions of Aristotelian drama. And that's, I hope, part of what Rainfall accomplishes in terms of the way we look at power. Yeah, so that's my very brief, truncated version of my background.
Thank you. I would love to hear about actually how you went from acting now to writing. It kind of overlapped with your schooling because, as I recall, this is a little trivia. Were you part of YPF at some point when you were a student at Rufus?
I think my play was a semi-finalist, and then it got axed. Which look, it's a tough racket, man.
To be at that point,
it's a tough racket. Yeah, but I wrote a little thing. I wrote a play in high school. I think it was about the death of Ben Jonson or somebody, like Shakespeare dealing with the death of one of his contemporaries, something like that. But I'd always written. I'd started writing younger than that, 14 or 15, and I started with short fiction and poetry, as a lot of people do. And I think partially just because it's a form that is more rewarding because it's easier to finish stuff. Really practical level, you finish something, you're like, oh, I have a thing that I can show people.
Yes.
And I think drama always seemed really daunting to me, and partially because I was reading these plays that were sort of mammoth, 100 pages, 120 pages. So I was scared. I think I felt scared to try it for a while. And then I had a very, very busy year. I'd had some stuff published like very minor publications as a poet. And I was 22, the last year of college, and I wrote a one-act play in a playwriting class, and kind of rediscovered like, oh, I love this. And I love that it allows me to flex a different muscle than I do when I'm acting, especially in classical theater. I get to find the places where I get to subvert those forms, or go around the corner and look at them in a different way. So that kind of sparked this thing in me that I then didn't. Again, it got buried for a while. The playwriting thing specifically, I was writing through the whole period, but again, mostly shorter form stuff. And then I finished this very, very busy year of work this past September, where I lived in 4 different cities in a year, and it was great. I mean, it's a good problem to have, but I was exhausted and felt kind of empty, in the sense that I was like, oh, I did all this work and now it's gone. It's in the ether. And I'd had all of this kind of personal life stuff stored up in me, it felt like. And then I had this, in September, I started writing, and I wrote my debut play, Sapiens, and then Rainfall, and a couple of other things, couple of screenplays and stuff. But suddenly I felt like, oh, I'm ready. I'm ready to tackle this kind of scary form. And I have the personal stuff. I felt like I had the personal things and the things I needed to say that were sort of ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess that's that just about brings us up to speed.
Yes, thank you for that too. I just dropped a note into the listening. Sapiens is a great play. If you are also fans of Ford, you probably heard it as part of their Wisconsin Rights readings this past week or the week before? No, time has no meaning. And Rainfall is, I know that you have, it's a really cool play on words in the title. I would expect nothing less of you as a wordsmith, and a protean, chameleon actor, to have the facility to consider that. So tell me about the title of this play. If we hear it, we hear rainfall, but reading it resonates in a couple of different ways. Can you tell us about that and about your inspiration for it?
Sure. Yeah, I start with my inspiration. I was unemployed and sort of like, I need something to get my brain going. I somehow got a hold of a copy of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a really quick read. It's like a little pamphlet, basically. And I read that and I thought, oh, this is really cool. The kind of the first story, really early, like some of the earliest writing we have access to. Mm-hmm. I thought I would love to contemporize this somehow. And I thought about Gilgamesh and making Gilgamesh some kind of like media baron, who's this guy who's very, very powerful, height of his career, but is a complicated and problematic character in that is he a hero? Is he an anti-hero? How does he use his power? Mm-hmm. But then this character Ishtar appears in Gilgamesh as a very peripheral character. She's the goddess of love and war to the ancient Sumerians. And so I became interested in her, and I read basically all the writings about her, and there are a ton. And she, it turns out, is a much more interesting character than Gilgamesh. Like, she's way more complicated and way more fun, and she has more sides to her. She feels like a person. She feels like, wow, I was like, wow, this is a whole person that exists in mythology. Mm-hmm. And it also struck me that, this stuff that we inherited is, the cuneiform stuff, the earliest writing. It's just people scratching symbols onto clay tablets. Is concerned with women. So like the idea of women inspiring the concept of literacy blew my mind. And was like, wow, that's not something I learned in college. Jesus Christ. Like that messes with the whole cosmos, right? So I took that. That was really the germ of it. When I realized that, I was like, oh, this is the play. Something in this is the play. So Ishtar, yeah. So it's a play that's about power on one level, right? Because a lot of power's on our minds all the time right now. Power and identity, right? We're so preoccupied with that, and we should be. So that's one angle. But it's also sort of a family drama, a family struggle for power. So I hope there's some love in it too. It's about sisterhood. It's about unity. So Reign, Reign, you know, of course, we think about kings and queens and power and all that stuff. But also there's in the original legends, when Ishtar leaves to visit her sister in the underworld, she leaves the earth kind of starts to fall apart. And because she's the goddess of fertility, people are infertile, crops aren't growing, things are falling apart. So I took that and ran with it. And I thought, what if the longer she's gone, the more the world suffers, right? And there's the corollary of that is also when women are in conflict, greater things suffer, right? When women are in conflict with each other, especially if that conflict has been in some way architected or in some way built by a system that is designed to exclude them, right? Then the whole thing suffers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also a sort of you could think about that in terms of global warming too. There's a passage in the play where one of the characters has gone to Earth and comes back down and says, basically, things aren't going well. It hasn't rained in it hasn't rained in 1,000 years. So the part of the play is also Ishtar just trying to get it to rain on Earth, physically rain, mm-hmm. because the crops are suffering and everything. So it's hopefully it weaves together power, our relationship with nature and our relationship with each other. So hopefully weaves those together.
That's really exciting. Thank you for that introduction. For those of you who are listening or those of you who have just joined us, we're talking with Eric Schabla, actor and playwright, Wisconsin born and bred and mostly working, although all over the place as well. What we've just been talking about, for those of you who don't yet know, the event that we have coming up this week on Facebook Live through Milwaukee Chamber Theater is as we are hosting some playwrights and platforms, giving them a platform for their work to hear it. Eric Schabla's play Rainfall will be the latest one to be featured. That will be Wednesday night at 7 p.m. So please tune in and join us to hear some cool stuff. I can say that with experience because I have read this play and I'm really curious about how, especially the relationship between the sisters will play out in this reading. I'm curious about how actors will interpret it, because I myself, just reading it, saw, I think one of the hallmarks of the piece, this is the first time you're hearing this from me too, one of the hallmarks of the piece to me is the really naughty complexity of the sisters in the underworld, their relationship in the underworld, their relationship before, how they have ammunition that they sometimes choose to use against the other and sometimes don't, how they know each other better than anyone else knows them.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the thing that really resonated with me. And so, someone who's that close to you.
Yeah, and there
hurt you more. Is that something that really?
In order for somebody, in order for there to be stakes, in order for enough to be at risk personally, there has to be deep love under all of it too. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that's really important to me, because I think it's all well and good to write about power, but it's also a very facile subject. in that you can get sucked into a kind of tract play, and so I really tried to create a foundation especially between those sisters, a long history. And I have siblings, and I grew up. I mean, God, I'm talking to you, Marcy. I grew up being influenced by amazing, strong, independent, really critically thinking women. So that's I try to take all of that and put it in the play. And of course, I'll always be a man writing about women too. But yeah, as you say, like, I think the Ali Babich and Cassie Bissell, who your audiences probably know,
Yes,
they're doing amazing work in these roles, and they're both, in their own ways, they're both guarded, but you also get the sense that they're both aching, really deeply aching to be with each other. And part of the premise of the play is that they haven't seen each other in thousands of years, because time works somewhat differently for them. But yeah, that's really what I'm trying to do. In addition to talking about the relationship of these women to power, is it's like, how does sisterhood influence that, and how do you find unity within that?
Or do you find, as you're studying it with these actors, do you find that there are elements there always when the scaffold of a play is written? I should say this first. There are always elements that seem like the playwright has layered in, but turns out if you get a chance to talk with the playwright, it was unconscious. It was part of that. It was part of inspiration. Is there anything that is unfolding or coming to light that you hadn't seen in your play yet, but by virtue of storytellers getting hold of it, they're finding it?
Elise Edelman is playing this third character, Uda, who's the record keeper. So she's sort of a savant character who has access to all this information, but she's treated horribly. I mean, she's the bottom rung on the ladder until she kind of she discovers this thing in herself over the course of the play. But Elise is doing this, first of all, hilarious thing. Because that's the other thing, is I also hope this is really funny.
Yes.
Because but so Elise is doing she's making this great choice that's like, she's starting out in the first couple of scenes, she's really big and sort of, I am the royal announcer, like almost an Ionesco thing in terms of sort of stock character. And then slowly she's peeling that away, and it becomes more personal and more subtle. And as she gets further and further, she's adding these colors and adding these layers, and suddenly, I felt like, whoa, when did it become three-dimensional? Suddenly she made it. I was surprised to see, like, oh, this is a person. And I don't know. I mean, I sort of intended that in her arc, but Elise does it in such a way that it sneaks up on you. So there's this speech that she has close to the end about a child that she abandoned, and you're like, she did it the first time, and I was like, whoa, I did not see that coming, because she set me up to think that this is a completely different person. So stuff like that. I really try to write. I try to leave space for actors that are as smart as those three to have agency and to make big choices about arc and about character history and psychology.
And working with these three women too, beyond the genius I know that they're bringing to this text too, are you discovering? I guess my question is, what's it like to hear, being, as you said, a man writing for women and really conscious of that? What are you learning in the 180 or the 360? That is the conversation of the playwright with the actors regarding gender. Is there anything that is coming up just in terms of text and
that's a great question.
The relationship?
That's such a great question, because the first thing I said to them was, before we started reading it, was, if at any point you feel that if you feel like, oh, this is a male playwright needlessly pitting two women against each other, then we stop and we talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't happened yet. That doesn't mean it's not in the play.
Right.
But I actually think the biggest thing I've noticed is there are places where I've maybe been too safe, and where, where I'll say like, I don't love this, but here's the alternate line. And the director, this wonderful young director from New York, Leah Squillace, he's like, Eric, don't make the safe choice. Don't hide. Don't make the safe choice. And some of it comes down to a question of, do we show the world in the larger, like, meta-theatrical sense? Do we show the world as it ought to be or as it is? And most of the time, in this play specifically, it's more interesting to show the world as it is and then to sort of pick that apart and deconstruct it. But that's also a very dangerous choice for a white guy. It's a dangerous choice for anyone, but I think especially given the reckoning that we're in, it's a dangerous choice for me. But I have to, I'm obligated to make it because it's important that these characters be as deep and as complicated as possible. So in some ways I don't have a choice, because writing the tepid play, the tepid safe play, is less helpful in terms of the liberation movement than writing the play that has the potential to be scary and provocative and maybe revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it is all of those things, but if there's no potential for it to be, then what are we doing?
Right.
What are we doing? Right? Why? I'm not interested in giving an audience a brief sojourn from their life and then they come back having learned nothing, or questioning nothing, I guess is probably the way to put it. I'm not trying to teach you things, I guess, per se, but yeah. So basically, they've just been great about being like, no, be more dangerous, make a more dangerous choice. I'm like, yeah, I love it.
Oh, that's super. And it's also wonderful that as a playwright, I mean, I would think nothing that I wouldn't think that you would be any different, but it's really, it must be really exciting as a playwright growing to have that encouragement, to have that push to take those risks.
Yes.
Even if they're terrifying.
Oh my God, yeah, so terrifying. But I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to have the advocacy of these 4 women specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been a really great, albeit brief, rehearsal process.
I'm really looking forward to hearing it on Wednesday night, and I hope those of you who are joining us or who will be watching this later join us 7 p.m. Central Time. I'm going to keep plugging Rainfall by Eric Schabla. Schabla, we have just a couple minutes left, so I would love to ask you a question about your own career as an actor, playwright, theater artist. Where in a world in which we can continue to excavate, my favorite word these days, excavate what we need to and build anew, where do you hope your career, your creativity to go? Do you have thoughts about that specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm less and less interested. I think when I came out of school, I just wanted to work like everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm less and less interested in being the cog in somebody else's machine. And I think I would like to create things with, I'd like to create things that in some way challenge what we've received. And that doesn't always mean disregarding it.
Mm-hmm.
I think specifically I would love to actually work. I think television is a fascinating thing right now because it's people are starting to have higher expectations for what the medium can do. So I would love one day to write for TV. I think that'd be interesting to create a show. Like I just remember seeing Deadwood for the first time and being like, I didn't know you were allowed to do this. Or seeing Atlanta for the first time, being like, whoa, where the hell was this? Like, this wasn't on in the 90s. Like, this TV has changed so much. So, I think that's an interesting world. Like, exploring other mediums as a writer might be cool.
Well, here's to it. I'll be following your career.
I'll be following yours.
I still remember that Henry IV, years ago in Milwaukee.
Yeah, wow. It feels like a lifetime ago.
It's an age.
Yeah.
Speaking of time and ages, our time here this morning has come to an end, but it's so good to see your face even from afar. Do take care. And here's to it. I'm looking forward to Wednesday night. Everybody joining us this morning, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Wednesday night, hear this work. Sorry, I interrupted you, Mr. Schabla. Feel free to say hello to the peoples.
Yeah, hey, I see Jonathan Wainwright. Yeah, he was just in the reading of Sapiens. He was amazing. Allie Babbage, all right.
Shout out.
We'll see you Wednesday night.
We'll see you all then. Take care. Thanks for being here. So long.